In the quiet hills of Decatur County, Tennessee, where morning mist dances through ancient oaks and neighbors still wave from their porches, there lived a young woman whose bright smile could light up any room. Her name was Holly Bobo, and on a crisp April morning in 2011, she would vanish into those very woods that had sheltered her childhood dreams, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt a community and challenge everything people believed about justice. Holly was the kind of daughter every parent dream of raising. Born on October 12, 1990, she possessed that rare combination of beauty and kindness that made her unforgettable to everyone she met. At 20 years old, Holly was studying nursing at the University of Tennessee at Martin, driven by a desire to heal and help others that seemed to flow from her very soul. The Bobo family home sat nestled in the rural community of Darden, where cotton fields stretched toward the horizon, and everyone knew their neighbors' middle names. It was the kind of place stirring. Unknown to Holly and her family, their idyllic community harbored secrets that would soon shatter their world forever. April 13, 2011, dawned like countless other spring mornings in Darden. Holly woke early, as was her habit, preparing for another day of classes at the university. She moved through her morning routine with the casual confidence of someone who believed the world was fundamentally safe and good. She gathered her nursing textbooks, kissed her family goodbye, and stepped out into what should have been just another ordinary day. But this morning would be anything but ordinary. Clint Bobo was still in bed when he heard what sounded like their family dog barking urgently outside. Something in the sound made him uneasy, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. When he peered through the window, what he saw would be burned into his memory forever. Holly walking toward the dense woods behind their home, accompanied by a man dressed in camouflage clothing. At first, Clint's mind processed the scene through the lens of normalcy. Drew, Holly's boyfriend, often wore camouflage when he went hunting. Perhaps he had stopped by early to walk Holly to her car or share some morning news. But as Clint watched, something felt wrong. Holly's posture seemed different, not the relaxed gait of someone walking with a loved one, but something more rigid, more uncertain. "Holly," Clint called out, expecting his sister to turn and wave as she always did. But Holly didn't turn. She didn't wave. She just kept walking toward the tree line, her blonde hair catching the early morning light one last time before disappearing into the shadows of the woods. Clint reached for his phone and dialed Hollis' number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. A chill ran down his spine as he realized something was terribly wrong. With shaking hands, he called his mother at work. "Mom," he said, his voice tight with panic. "Something's wrong. Holly was walking into the woods with someone, and she won't answer her phone." Karen Bobo felt her heart drop into her stomach. She knew her daughter, knew her routines, knew that Holly would never ignore a call from family without good reason. "Call 911, she told Clint. "Call them right now." When the first responders arrived at the Bobo home, they found a scene that would become seared into the collective memory of everyone who witnessed it. Holly's car sat in the driveway exactly where she had parked it the night before. Her nursing books and supplies were scattered on the ground near the carport, as if they had been dropped suddenly or knocked from her hands. Most chilling of all, there were small drops of blood near where her belongings lay abandoned. Detective work in rural Tennessee differs vastly from the urban investigations often portrayed on television. Here, the investigating officers knew the families involved, had perhaps gone to school with the parents, or coached their children in Little League. The personal connection made the case more urgent, but also more painful for everyone involved. Within hours, what began as a missing person investigation had transformed into one of the largest search operations in Tennessee history. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, took the lead, bringing with them sophisticated equipment and expertise in handling high-profile cases. The FBI soon joined the effort, recognizing that the circumstances suggested a kidnapping that could potentially cross state lines. Hundreds of volunteers emerged from the surrounding communities, creating a human chain that stretched across fields and through forests. They came armed with flashlights, walking sticks, and an unshakable determination to bring Holly home. Church groups organized food for the searchers, local businesses donated supplies, and strangers became united in a common purpose. The terrain they faced was unforgettable. The woods around Darden are dense and tangled, filled with hidden ravines, abandoned hunting cabins, and forgotten logging roads that haven't seen human traffic in decades. Every step forward could reveal a clue or lead searchers further from the truth. The spring rains had made the ground soft and treacherous. Volunteers who had started the search expecting to find Holly within hours now spoke in hushed tones about preparing for a longer ordeal. The media attention intensified, bringing national news crews to the small town and transforming the Bobo family's private tragedy into a public obsession. As investigators dug deeper into the circumstances surrounding Holly's disappearance, they began to uncover a side of their peaceful community that most residents had never imagined existed. Beneath the surface of rural tranquility, they discovered a network of drug manufacturing and distribution that had taken root in the isolated hills and abandoned properties scattered throughout the county. Methamphetamine production had found a perfect home in the remote areas around Darden. The isolated locations provided cover from law enforcement surveillance, while the poverty that had crept into some corners of the community created a ready market for both users and individuals willing to participate in the dangerous business of manufacturing illegal drugs. The investigation revealed a loose association of individuals connected by their involvement in this underground economy. These weren't the sophisticated criminal organizations seen in movies, but rather a collection of desperate people, small-time dealers, and dangerous individuals who had gravitated toward each other through their shared involvement in illegal activities. Among the names that began surfacing in the investigation were Zachary Adams and his brother Dylan, Jason Autry, and Shane Austin. These men were known to local law enforcement for various drug-related offenses, but they had never been considered capable of something as serious as kidnapping and murder. The revelation that Holly's disappearance might be connected to this criminal underworld sent shockwaves through a community that had always believed such things happened in other places to other people. Investigators theorized that Holly might have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, perhaps witnessing something that made her a liability to individuals involved in illegal activity. Alternatively, she might have been targeted randomly by someone under the influence of drugs, or someone who saw an opportunity and acted on a violent impulse. The search for Holly continued for months, then years, with periodic bursts of activity when new leads emerged, or when volunteer groups organized renewed efforts. The Bobo family became the public face of the investigation, appearing on national television programs and speaking at events designed to keep Holly's case in the public consciousness. Karen and Dana Bobo displayed remarkable strength during this period, channeling their grief into action. They worked with other families of missing persons, advocated for improved resources for law enforcement agencies handling such cases, and never stopped believing that someone, somewhere, knew what had happened to their daughter. The community of Darden was forever changed by Holly's disappearance. What had once been a place where people felt safe became a community, where parents watched their children more carefully and residents locked their doors at night. The case served as a stark reminder that tragedy could strike anywhere, even in the most peaceful and seemingly secure places. As the investigation continued, law enforcement agencies followed hundreds of leads, interviewed countless potential witnesses, and pursued every possible avenue of inquiry. Some leads took investigators to other states, following reports of Holly sightings or tips about individuals who might have been involved in her disappearance. Each lead that failed to pan out was another small heartbreak for the family, and another reminder of how difficult it can be to solve cases with limited physical evidence. The $50,000 reward for information leading to Holly's return generated tips from across the country, but none provided the breakthrough that investigators desperately needed. The case began to take on the characteristics of a cold case, though law enforcement officials continued to insist that the investigation remained active and that they would never give up their search for answers. On March 5, 2014, nearly 3 years after Holly's disappearance, the silence was broken by news that sent shockwaves through Decatur County and beyond. The TBI announced the arrest of Zachary Adams, charging him with first-degree murder, and especially aggravated kidnapping in connection with Hollis' death. The arrest came as a surprise to many in the community, though Adams was known to local law enforcement for his involvement in drug-related activities. What investigators had learned during their long investigation remained largely secret, but they indicated that new witness testimony had provided the breakthrough they needed to move forward with charges. Adams was not an unknown figure in the area, but he also wasn't someone who had been prominently mentioned in the early speculation about who might have been responsible for Hollis' disappearance. His arrest raised as many questions as it answered, particularly since Hollis' body had still not been found. The charges against Adams were severe, reflecting the prosecution's belief that Holly had not only been kidnapped, but had also suffered additional violence before her death. The decision to file murder charges without a body indicated that investigators believed they had developed sufficient evidence to prove that Holly was dead, and that Adams was responsible for her death. Following Adams' arrest, additional suspects were taken into custody. Jason Wayne Autry was arrested in April 2014, facing the same charges as Adams. The two men were known to associate with each other and were both connected to the local drug trade that investigators had identified as a possible motive for Hollis' kidnapping. The charges facing the defendants were severe, including first-degree murder, especially aggravated kidnapping, and aggravated rape. These charges reflected the prosecution's theory that Holly had been subjected to sexual violence before being murdered, making the case even more emotionally charged and legally complex. In September 2017, more than 6 years after Hollis' disappearance, Zachary Adams finally faced trial for her murder. The proceedings were moved to Hardin County due to the extensive media coverage and community interest that made it difficult to find impartial jurors in Decatur County. The trial became a showcase for the challenges facing prosecutors in cases that rely heavily on witness testimony and circumstantial evidence. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Matt Stowe and Special Prosecutor Jennifer Nichols, painted a picture of Adams as a dangerous individual involved in drug-related violence who had targeted Holly for reasons that might never be fully understood. Jason Autry's testimony formed the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. According to Autry's account, the group had kidnapped Holly from her home, taken her to a remote location, and subjected her to hours of sexual assault before ultimately killing her and disposing of her body in the woods, where it was eventually found. Autry's testimony was devastating in its detail, providing the narrative structure that prosecutors needed to tie together their various pieces of circumstantial evidence. He described conversations, actions, and decisions that only someone with intimate knowledge of the crime could have known. His account filled in the gaps that had existed in the prosecution's case and provided a coherent explanation for how Holly had ended up dead in those Tennessee woods. However, Autry's testimony was not without significant problems. Defense attorneys, led by Jennifer Thompson, attacked his credibility relentlessly, pointing out his extensive criminal history, his drug use, and the favorable plea agreement he had received in exchange for his cooperation. They argued that Autry had every incentive to lie and that his testimony should not be trusted. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence directly connecting Adams to the crime and argued that the prosecution's case was built on the unreliable testimony of criminals trying to save themselves. After 11 days of testimony and several hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Zachary Adams was convicted of first-degree murder, especially aggravated kidnapping and aggravated rape, earning him a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the Bobo family, the conviction represented a measure of justice for Holly, though nothing could truly compensate for their loss. Karen and Dana Bobo spoke about their relief that someone had finally been held accountable for their daughter's death, while acknowledging that the legal victory could not bring Holly back or undo the years of pain they had endured. The conviction also brought a sense of closure to the community of Darden, which had lived under the shadow of Hollis' unsolved disappearance for more than 6 years. Residents who had wondered whether a killer was still among them could finally feel some measure of security, knowing that the person responsible for the most serious crime in their community's recent memory had been brought to justice. However, Adams continued to maintain his innocence, and his defense team immediately began planning appeals. The conviction was not the end of the legal proceedings, but rather another chapter in a story that was far from over. The other defendants in the case also faced their legal reckoning. Dylan Adams accepted an Alford plea. Shane Austin also reached a plea deal with authorities. Just when it seemed that the Holly Bobo case had finally reached its conclusion, a development occurred that would call everything into question once again. In early 2024, Jason Autry, the star witness whose testimony had been crucial to Zachary Adams' conviction, filed stunning court documents recanting his previous testimony. In these new statements, Autry claimed that his testimony during Adams' trial had been false, and that he had lied under oath when he implicated Adams in Hollis' rape and murder. The recantation sent shockwaves through the legal community and provided Adams' attorneys with new grounds to seek a reversal of his conviction. Autry's recantation raised profound questions about the reliability of the evidence that had led to Adams' conviction. If the key witness in the case was now admitting that he had lied, what did that mean for the integrity of the verdict? Had an innocent man been convicted of one of Tennessee's most notorious murders? The timing of Autry's recantation also raised questions about his motivations. Why had he waited so long to come forward with these claims? What had changed that made him willing to admit to perjury, which could result in additional criminal charges against him? Legal experts noted that courts are generally skeptical of witness recantations, which are often viewed as attempts by witnesses to escape the consequences of their previous testimony, or to help friends or associates who have been convicted based on that testimony. However, the centrality of Autry's testimony to Adams' conviction meant that his recantation could not simply be dismissed without careful consideration. As of 2024, Zachary Adams remains in prison serving his life sentence, but his case has returned to the courts as his attorneys seek post-conviction relief based on Autry's recantation. The legal proceedings are complicated by the fact that Adams' conviction was based on more than just Autry's testimony, though that testimony was undoubtedly the most compelling evidence presented to the jury. The case has attracted renewed attention from legal experts, true crime enthusiasts, and advocates for criminal justice reform who are following the developments closely. The situation highlights the complexities of cases that rely heavily on witness testimony, particularly when those witnesses have their own criminal histories and motivations for cooperating with authorities. For the Bobo family, the recent developments have reopened wounds that they thought had begun to heal. The possibility that the wrong person might be in prison for Hollis murder, or that there might have been serious errors in the investigation and prosecution of the case, has forced them to confront the possibility that justice for their daughter remains elusive. The community of Darden, too, has been affected by these new developments. Residents who thought they had finally put the Holly Bobo case behind them find themselves once again confronting questions about what really happened on that April morning in 2011, and whether the truth has been discovered or remains hidden in the shadows of those Tennessee hills. Meanwhile, Jason Autry has faced his own legal troubles. In June 2024, he was sentenced to 19 years in federal prison on unrelated weapons charges, adding another layer of complexity to his credibility as a witness and his motivations for recanting his previous testimony. The story of Holly Bobo is ultimately a story about the complexity of truth and the challenges of seeking justice in an imperfect world. It is a tale that began with a young woman's bright dreams and ended with questions that may never be fully answered. Hollis' legacy extends far beyond the tragic circumstances of her death. Her case has led to improvements in how law enforcement agencies handle missing person investigations, has provided comfort and support to other families facing similar tragedies, and has reminded countless people of the precious nature of life and the importance of cherishing time with loved ones. The legal proceedings that continue to unfold serve as a reminder that the pursuit of justice is often messy and complicated, involving flawed people making difficult decisions with incomplete information. Whether Zachary Adams is ultimately granted a new trial or his conviction is upheld, the case will continue to be studied and debated by those interested in criminal justice and the search for truth. For Karen and Dana Bobo, their son Clint, and all who loved Holly, the ongoing legal uncertainty represents a continuation of a journey that began more than a decade ago. They have shown remarkable strength and grace throughout their ordeal, demonstrating the power of love and faith to sustain people through even the darkest of times. As the Tennessee Hills continue to keep their secrets and the legal system continues to wrestle with questions of truth and justice, Holly's story serves as a reminder that some mysteries may never be fully solved. Some questions may never receive satisfactory answers, and some wounds may never completely heal. But perhaps the most important part of Holly's story is not how it ends, but how it began with a young woman full of hope and compassion, dreams and possibilities, who touched the lives of everyone she met, and whose memory continues to inspire others to seek truth, demand justice, and never give up hope, even in the darkest of times. In the quiet hills of Decatur County, where morning mist still dances through ancient oaks and neighbors still wave from their porches, Holly Lynn Bobo's story continues to unfold. A testament to the enduring power of love, the complexity of truth, and the unending human desire to make sense of tragedy and find meaning in loss.